This is Greg Kilpack, and I have argued in other videos that secret combinations and the Great and Abominable Church are basically the same thing. Secret combinations is a temporal name given to organizations that are trying to get money and power, whereas the Great and Abominable Church is the name that the angel gave to Nephi. So that's like the doctrine that people in secret combinations follow. But it's basically the same people that are in both organizations. It's just one's a temporal name and one's a spiritual name. But this is who it is in the world today, in modern times. Now keep in mind that everything that I tell you here is established fact. There's no theory here at all. It's all documented, okay? So if you want to, research any of this, you can find it online right now. Don't take my word for it. Go read about these things. But this is what I've learned from the last 5 years of research. So it all began with John D. Rockefeller, who basically cornered the oil industry in its infancy in the 1800s with Standard Oil. And if you read about good old John D. Rockefeller, he basically used every bully tactic and dirty business trick he could to grow Standard Oil by basically forcing his competitors out of business or else taking them over through threats or underhanded tactics. So basically, at one point, Standard Oil controlled 90% of the oil industry in the late 1800s in the United States, making John D. Rockefeller the richest American in history. He is believed to have been about 3 times richer than Jeff Bezos is today. Okay, very rich guy. And it was his desire, to basically take over the world, which he passed on to his family and his sons. And after getting into the oil industry, he quickly jumped into banking. And so oil and banking are two very corrupt industries from the beginning in the United States. Chase Bank and their associates, that's all part of the Rockefeller network, along with most of Wall Street these days and the big banks on Wall Street. So that's where it all begins with John D. Rockefeller and his family. Now, if you know about this, you know that Prescott Bush was instrumental in setting up the CIA. Prescott Bush was in the Senate, and he was basically the CIA spokesman, helped to get them established in the first place. And we know that the CIA has overthrown many governments around the world in order to steal their resources, going back to Nicaragua, going back to Iran for their oil in the 1950s. Many Latin American countries, Guatemala, and so forth. You can study this. They're all about making money, stealing resources from other countries that were defenseless against the powerful U.S. military or underhanded tactics of the CIA. You can read all about that online as well. All the different countries that the CIA has overthrown since the 1950s. All right. So the CIA is basically a corrupt organization controlled ultimately by the Rockefellers. Now, the CIA, the whole organization is not dirty. It's just the executive branch, the top 20%, basically, is exactly what I heard CIA whistleblower say on the internet just in the past couple of months. And here it is, January 2025. So it's just the leadership. A lot of the people in the CIA are thinking they're, patriots and they're good people trying to do what they think is right, but they're led by evil people, okay, who are a part of this network. Also part of the network is the Federal Reserve, which is a banking monopoly. It sounds like a government institution, but it isn't, okay? It's a banking monopoly. If you want to read about that, go read The Creature from Jekyll Island by Griffin. Great book. It's basically is the history of the early founding of the Great and Abominable Church in the United States. The Federal Reserve is part of the huge national debt and government overspending. What happens is the government spends too much money, and to finance that, who makes the money? The banks. And who owns the banks? The Rockefellers, basically, are the main wealth holders behind many of the banks in the United States on Wall Street. In time, some of it, much of it through the CIA, the media was taken over to tell all the lies to the American public. In the 1950s, it started with the New York Times and the Washington Post, also Life magazine. But it's only increased since then. And basically, pretty much all the mainstream media, all the large news outlets have basically been taken over. And you can tell this is true when they're all basically parroting the same exact thing. Almost word for word, they're reading from a script. When that happens, you pretty much know that it's the deep state is behind it, giving a message that they want sent out to everybody. Okay? Now, the CIA is using muscle and violence to overthrow countries, to steal their wealth, but they're also basically controlling the politicians. They have so much money that they either bribe the politicians or they blackmail them or help force them out of their office, out of their position through their money. Okay, you may not know this, but the U.S. government is missing 20 to 30 or more trillion dollars from government agency coffers. Just kind of disappeared. Don Rumsfeld talked about this the day before 9/11. Missing something like $2 trillion was missing from the Pentagon. How do you lose $2 trillion? You don't. You steal it and hide it in offshore bank accounts. So that's what's going on there. They're just outright stealing the money. Then you've got the military-industrial complex, which is why in the United States we spend more money on defense than the next something like 26 countries combined. It is a huge portion of national spending each year, even though, no one would dare attack us, and they're doing that. It's all for money because the military-industrial complex is part of the Rockefeller network, okay? It's all part of the same network. LBJ and his cohorts in Texas made a lot of money during the Vietnam War, and a lot of LBJ's friends, including himself, he got stock in these companies, made a lot of money from the Vietnam War from all the companies in Texas. That's why Texas is a big part of the military-industrial complex. And they're still making, hundreds of billions of dollars a year through U.S. spending in the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower and Truman both warned the American people about this shortly after leaving office. So just need to be aware of that. Also part of the Rockefeller network is many different international organizations. The United Nations is a big part of it, trying to basically turn the whole world into one government that they control, so that they have all the money and then they can keep everyone else in line so they can do whatever crime they want to do. That's what it's all about. It's about money and power. It's just like it says in the Book of Mormon. It's about money and power. This is the network that Moroni warned us about in Moroni chapter 8. It's starting to come out, all of this information, not just by me, but a lot of different authors and people with their YouTube channels talking about this, including G. Edward Griffin and Creature from Jekyll Island and Whitney Webb, not to mention a whole bunch of other authors and people online. This is the time where this information is coming out. The World Economic Forum is really part of this network. Klaus Schwab and his cohorts. Klaus Schwab was basically a good friend or a student of Henry Kissinger. It was definitely part of this network. And so this is all just trying to organize the whole world into one organization that the Rockefellers can control. The World Bank is part of this network. They're trying to do on a world scale what the Federal Reserve has done in the United States, spending too much money, getting control of all the money in the whole world. So that's what's going on. Now, keep in mind, this is not the politicians that are really doing this in the United States. They're subservient to the Rockefellers and the money, the corrupt money behind the scenes. Now, some politicians are willingly part of the network, and some, have no choice and would fight against it if they could. But basically, most are corrupt and just succumbing to the money that's thrown at them in order to be controlled by the Rockefellers. That's what's going on. So it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats in power, they're both subservient to the Rockefellers and the deep state behind the scenes. That's what's going on here. One other thing I'd like to tell you about is that the CIA and Israeli intelligence are basically, the same network. They work very closely together and have for decades. That's really why Israel is in such good political allies with the United States. And for decades, no U.S. politician would speak out against Israel. That's why. Jeffrey Epstein was part of the Israeli intelligence network, bribing people in the U.S. government, including politicians. That's why he had all the cameras in his boat and on his plane and on his island and in all his residences. It was all a blackmail operation to control U.S. politicians so that, if they're caught doing things they shouldn't be doing in the bedroom, that they would be outed and their videos would be shown and they'd be thrown out of their position and all that. So that's what it is. If you want to read about that, read Whitney Webb's first book, One Nation Under Blackmail. It talks all about that. So basically, this is what's going on. Also, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and a whole bunch of other foundations and organizations are part of this, okay? So just be aware that this is a sprawling network. It is huge. When we're talking about Great and Abominable Church, we're talking, it is great, it has power, it is big, it's sprawling, and it does have control throughout the whole world. Okay, that's what's going on. These are the guys who are the foundation of, or the fountain of corruption in the world today. They are doing so much evil in the world. The Rockefellers are behind Planned Parenthood that does something like 400,000 abortions in the United States every year. David Rockefeller helped to establish Planned Parenthood through funding. Also, you've got Hugh Hefner and Playboy was helped to get established through Rockefeller money. And of course, Hugh Hefner was a rapist, sexual abuser. So he's, this is the same thing. They're all the same way. They're perverts, they're sexual deviants. They're the fountain of evil in the world today, this network. John the Beloved in the book of Revelation called it, the mother of abominations, because of all the prostitutes that they're involved in. Now, go read 1 Nephi chapter 13 and 14. Compare what it says to what you read about this, and you'll see it's the same group of people, okay? It's the same organization. The government is lying to us. The government is starting these wars in Ukraine, and wars, probably part of starting the wars between Israel and the Palestinians right now. They're causing all sorts of havoc in the world today, and it's going to end up with Russia, nuking somebody somewhere, or China. It's what's going to happen. So get your food supply ready, be spiritually prepared, and listen to every word that the prophet and apostles have to say. Okay? The church is true. The Lord is going to protect us. He already knows everything that's going to happen. He's already provided for our safety in Zion, meaning Independence, Missouri, as well as anywhere that the pure in heart reside. Okay, we're going to be okay. And just like in the early days of the church, the Lord is going to protect us, even though there will be some casualties. There will be some martyrs along the way. Okay, just be aware of that. I'm convinced that priesthood holders will use priesthood power against the wicked. That's why you're going to get the terror of the Lord in Zion, like it says in the Doctrine and Covenants. Okay, the saints are going to be okay, so don't worry about it. We're on the winning team. Everything's going to be okay. All right, but be prepared for some enormous events to come. Get your food supply ready. Get all your temporal preparations ready, and more than anything else, keep the commandments and become spiritually ready. Listen to the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's my message to you. So everybody, I hope that helps. This is Greg Kilpack, and I know that everything's going to work out, and the Lord will come again in just a few more years. Maybe, I'm guessing 20 to 50 more years from now. All right, so hang in there, keep the faith.